Well, we saw the anticipated debut of Kylian Mbappe in a Real Madrid shirt in a 2-0 win in the Super Cup against Atalanta, Champions League winners versus Europa League winners. And they did not disappoint. Now, Ancelotti gets accused of not being a great tactician, that he's just an eyebrow raise of a manager, and then the rest kind of takes care of itself. He manages on pure vibes, is what you believe if you read some of the statements that people put forward on the internet and on certain social media platforms. But that couldn't be further from the truth. He is tactically top draw, and this next Real Madrid, this next creation, is no different in terms of representing his phenomenal tactical qualities. And there were some issues in the first half, but overall, it just shows what a next level and progressive manager that Carlo Ancelotti really is. To incorporate the likes of Mbappe and Vinicius and Rodrigo and Bellingham into a team that works is going to take some doing, and he has found his rhythm. And fair play to Atalanta, they gave a good game, they did what they do, they pressed high and created some good chances, a couple good saves from Courtois, but quality won out in the end. And first, we're going to go over Real Madrid's attacking shape. As I was just saying, the way to describe Real Madrid's shape is simply fluid. And in the first half, it was a little bit chaotic. It regained some structure in the second half. First half, it was a little bit all over the place. First, we're going to go over Atalanta. They man-marked all over the pitch, aggressive, man-to-man, high press, in their 3-5-2 or 3-4-3, I guess you can say. They played without a striker, the Cataler and Lookman played split. The wing-backs would push up into the full-backs. They'd go man-for-man with Madrid's front three with their back three. Three midfielders on their three midfielders, so set. But what Madrid did is you'd have Mendy or Carvajal come in a little bit deeper, and this allowed either Rudiger or Militao as well to push up into the midfield. It was more often than not Rudiger. Militao did do it into this area here, and it turned this midfield into a little bit of a box. So with Bellingham and Valverde pushing up, Tchouameni making space, and Courtois, as he's not one to do, typically moved up the field, and he was comfortable taking the ball almost halfway up his own half at points. And Atalanta didn't bother with him. He wasn't their issue. He wasn't their player. And so they would stand off of him and they'd allow him to dwell on the ball with their man markers still going for their intended targets. And the further that Militao would push up, the more narrow that Carvajal and Mendy would come in these situations, and they'd play, as you can see there, with Militao moving up. Him moving up then gave the license for maybe Rodrigo to drop into the midfield and help outnumber the situation in here. Against Atalanta's man-marking system, you'd sometimes see Vinny Jr. doing the same thing on the left-hand side, dropping in a little bit deeper into these areas here, either side of the midfielders, to find those spaces that these players could play this pass into here, and it forced the wide centre-backs into situations where do they come and press this area or not? Typically, they would follow, they would engage with whoever was in that position. But the issue is this left Kylian Mbappe with room either side of Hien, who did deal with him fairly well at points. But these angled runs he makes off of his market into these areas for the long ball to find him is key. And it did hurt Atalanta a few times. And Real Madrid aren't afraid to go long. They're such a mixed team in terms of the way they build up short and go long. And the movements that Rodrigo and Vinicius Jr. made off of him were excellent. And not only did it give space for Kylian Mbappe to make these movements, if let's say I drop Rodrigo back and it's Vinny Jr. solely that's making this movement into this area here, then you'd see Jude Bellingham looking to spin his marker, which was typically De Roon into this space to look for the long ball into this area if maybe Mbappe wasn't making that movement or he was occupying Hien a bit centrally. So there were tons of ways they could open up that Atalanta shape using their man marking system against them. The powerful runs of Bellingham and Valverde in the half spaces where Rodrigo and Vinicius Jr. could make space was key. And it wouldn't just be through coming deep that Vinicius Jr. and Rodrigo would do that. They'd stretch wider. They'd really pull that back three apart with the fullbacks drawing the wing-backs further up the field. And Ruggieri and Zappacosta would be in a position where they maybe wouldn't come too far forward. So Madrid could have it in these situations. They'd also have to react to the defenders going into the midfield area. So they'd have to try and react to the outnumbering. And they did do decently at points. Madrid didn't create anything amazingly clear-cut in the first half, but they did get a bit of possession. The only issue is I found, and this is where it became a little bit chaotic in that first half, is because Militao and Rudiger were both moving into midfield, it meant that that build-up became a little bit more central and a little bit more narrow. And as a result, you'd find Bellingham coming back into these positions here to get on the ball and try and drive forward, which isn't his preferred method. He needs to be receiving the ball higher up the pitch in between the lines to drive at a defensive line. I think the deeper you get Bellingham on the ball, the less effective he is. And he was able to be pressed on the ball here, and Darun kept him where he wanted him. He still had a couple of moments, but nowhere near as effective as he was in the second half. And it was chaotic, it was brilliant, it was fluid, but it was to a bit of a detriment to Madrid. In the second half, though, it completely changed. I'll just tidy this up a bit. So, where it became a little bit more structured for Real Madrid in the second half is it wouldn't be both centre backs moving in. It would typically be either just Rudiger or not at all moving into the midfield areas, with Mendy cutting across, which allowed Carvajal more free rein to invert and find his space in the middle of the pitch and work with Valverde and Rodrigo on that right hand side. He can maintain width, allowing Rodrigo to come in a little bit more narrow. And also, you'd find Valverde dropping into this right back area to try and progress the ball. Now, what this did was this dragged Edison and Pasalic further up the field because Tchouameni is obviously a deeper sitting player anyway. And Bellingham, because of the fact they had their three at the back and Mendy was in a more orthodox left back role, was able to pick the ball up in between the lines. He was able to pull off, which he did time and time again. He was so good at creating a yard of space between himself and Darun, where he could get the ball in these areas, use his fantastic running power to ride the challenge of Darun and create in these areas here for Rodrigo and Mbappe. And that's where Real Madrid's main source of attack comes from. And Valverde using his powerful running from deep, his athleticism to get into the box and find the space that the likes of Mbappe would create by moving Hien away, that would create angles for Bellingham to play through. Vinicius Jr. doing the same. And their movement and their fluidity all between that front five really killed Atalanta's shape, their man mark, and they were just allowed to pull their markers to where they wanted to. But fantastic from Real Madrid and great adaptation. It just shows once they got through that hiccup of the first half, and not hiccup, but just the teething pains, and they found a bit of balance and a bit of structure. They got players in positions that were more effective. Bellingham higher up the pitch, Valverde being the player that was using his athleticism to get more box to box. And it was changed, and you'd still get the on-rushing runs of Militao and Rudiger, but it would only be in overloading situations. So let's just say if Rodrigo pulled into the space here to get on the ball, and Carvajal had come short, then you'd maybe get Rudiger making this run off of the back of Carvajal to drag Ruggeri in to allow more space to Carvajal. So it would be for reasons. It wouldn't just be automatic with their movements into the midfield and forward lines. It would be to create overloads and drag markers away. And as a result, they were able to carve out Atalanta open time and time again and create those chances and get the win. But how did they defend against Atalanta, and how did Atalanta play? Off the ball, Madrid pressed in the 4-4-2. They pressed high. They'd force Atalanta back, force them into making mistakes. But Atalanta used their fluid build-up, and they'd also use the positioning of the wider centre midfielders to create overload. So typically they'd move into a back four. The wing-backs would push up and create the width further up the field. You'd move it into a back four with Jim City and Hien forming the central players, Kolasinac moving to left back, and you'd get Darun dropping into this area here to try and help progress the ball, dragging Bellingham up. And the reasons why they would drop the wider midfielders into these positions is because when Madrid pressed with their midfield four, they would push high and they'd leave a lot of space in between the defensive four and the midfield four. And as a result, with the wing-backs pinning back the full-backs in Zappacosta on Mendy and Ruggeri on Carvajal, this created space for De Ketelaere and Lookman to get on the ball here, with Rudiger and Militao not as keen to engage, where they could then get on the ball, link up with the wing back, or they could play the ball across to the other player and create chances from there. And when they would break the ball into these positions, you get Madrid dropping a little bit further back into their 4-4-2 shape. From this position, with those little movements they'd make into space, they could hold on to the ball and bring the four on that side into play. So on the right side, it was Jim City, Darun, De Ketelaere and Zappacosta. On the left, it was Edison, Kolasinac, Ruggeri and Lookman. And as the wing-backs would push into the wide areas, you'd get the wide centre-back on that side pushing up as a supporting full-back, with Darun or the supporting midfielder looking for the overlapping option or the underlapping option, with the attacking player on the ball here to create these overloads and create chances down the wide areas, with Zappacosta getting to the byline to create chances or having the support of Jim City. And they would go from that and they would look to cross into the far post, where the other wing back or the other attacker could get on the end of it and hopefully put their chances away, or to Pasalic making a movement into space to try and get on the end of the ball with a late run from deep, which he did a few times and forced a really good save out of Courtois. But Madrid, in their defensive shape, they sit deeper, they drop back into shape quick, and they use their four on that side to combat with Atalanta's four. So Bellingham, Tchouaméni, and Rudiger would try and contain them down the side and prevent that overload from happening. Match them up 4-4, not in a man marking sense, but in a more zonal sense to prevent space from opening up with this four, not allowing to get dragged out into silly positions, and they contained them really well. With Hien moving across and Kolasinac, you still had that solid base of two centre-backs, with Edison dropping a little bit deeper into this area to give it a bit more security, and Jim City could quickly move back into space had he need to. But didn't open Real Madrid up enough. A few times it did, it was through those crossing opportunities. When Ben Godfrey came on at right wing back in the second half, he got a few chances at the far post from crosses from the left, the wing back to wing back with those wide overloads, and the four on each side. But Madrid defended individually at points, as we know they can do, excellently. And you got to give Atalanta a credit for giving it a go, but the team with the higher amount of quality won on the day, and that is just Real Madrid. Managerially, players, everything about them is just the best club in the world at the minute, isn't it? And the best club in football. But let me know what you guys think. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Cheers for watching, lads. In a bit.